It's an honor to be here once again to remind everyone about the things that we saw when we were on the delegation to Syria last August. We came away understanding that what's happening in Syria is criminal. I came back here as an American feeling disturbed and ashamed of what my government is doing and continues to do. We are heading a coalition of governments whose intent is to make the Syrian people suffer and remove their duly elected president. I think at this point most people understand that it is not the civil war that we are being told in the media. It is a proxy war. There are foreigners and people who are being paid and supported militarily, financially, to create the discourse and the suffering that we have been seeing in Aleppo and other places. It was clear to us from the meetings that we had that most of the Syrian people support Assad. And in fact, in all of our meetings, we didn't come across anyone who wasn't in support of Assad. There were people who were maybe critical of some things, but not everyone is unified. And regardless of religion, area where you live, regardless of any divisions that we in the United States like to use, labels we like to use to divide people, people in Syria are Syrians first. And they support Assad. They are looking to him to continue to lead the Syrian Arab army, to take back whatever places have been destroyed or stolen from them by foreigners. I am strongly in support of a continuation of what has been happening, what we've been seeing in Aleppo, getting rid of all of the foreign mercenaries, the terrorists who have been destroying and harming the Syrian people. It is time that we allow the Syrian people to begin their healing, to rebuild, and give them some time to figure out where they go from here. And I thank you very much for listening.
I've been to Syria 6 times since 2014, 2 of which were with international delegations, and 4 times were independently on a visa I applied for, paid for, and waited for. And I mention these because I think it's important people realize wherever I've gone, I've spoken in Arabic to the people I'm speaking with. What Donna, what Sarah have said, that the people support their army and government is absolutely true. Whatever you hear in the corporate media is the complete opposite. And on that note, what you hear in the corporate media, and I will name them, BBC, Guardian, New York Times, etc., on Aleppo is also opposite of reality. Aleppo since 2012 has been inhabited by different terrorist factions, among them al-Nusra, among them the so-called Free Syrian Army, which has committed the same heinous acts of terrorism as al-Nusra, as ISIS, as Ahrar al-Sham, as Nuruddin al-Zinki, which beheaded a 12-year-old Palestinian child, and somehow is still deemed moderate. What we've been hearing in the corporate media is not depicting an accurate image of what's happening in Aleppo. The corporate media is saying that the Syrian army is attacking people, and until today, the corporate media is maintaining this, even though the exact opposite is true. I would ask you to follow the voices of people in Syria who, like my colleagues here said, they want you to speak the truth. They're tired of lies. They're very well aware of the lies that our media is purporting and that our human rights groups are purporting. They want an end to the violence. They don't want this war to continue. They didn't ask for this war. But as my colleagues stressed, Syria is a sovereign nation. It has the right to fight against terrorism. And we know that 101 of 193 UN member states have sent terrorists to Syria to slaughter and destroy. So Syria is fighting a war against terrorism. It's winning in Aleppo, and hopefully either the terrorists will accept a deal to be transported out of Aleppo, hopefully they will participate in the Musalaha, the reconciliation, will lay down their arms, will take the amnesty offered to them by the government and which has been taken by thousands of former militants. And hopefully, above all, the US will stop supporting terrorism and stop funding terrorism.
As a journalist, I'm sure you can appreciate getting other impressions than empirical impressions from the ground. When you talk about the Syrian people and what the Syrian people want, how can you quantify that? Do you have any independent surveys where you can actually document that? And secondly, you talk about the corporate media, the Western media, the lies, and all of this. Could you explain what you think might be the agenda from us in the Western media, and why we should lie, why the international organizations on the ground should lie, why we shouldn't believe all these absolutely documentable facts that we see from the ground.
Let's start with your second question. So, international organizations on the ground. Tell me which ones are on the ground in eastern Aleppo. Yeah, okay, I'll tell you, there are none. There are none. These organizations are relying on the Syrian Observatory for Human Rights, which is based in Coventry, UK, and which is one man. They're relying on compromised groups like the White Helmets, which, let's talk about the White Helmets. The White Helmets were founded in 2013 by a British ex-military officer. They have been funded to the tune of $100 million by the US, UK, and Europe and other states. They purport to be rescuing civilians in eastern Aleppo and Idlib, yet no one in eastern Aleppo has heard of them. And I say no one, bearing in mind that now 95% of these areas of eastern Aleppo are liberated. The White Helmets purport to be neutral, yet they can be found carrying guns and standing on the dead bodies of Syrian soldiers. And their video footage actually contains children that have been recycled in different reports. So you can find a girl named Aya who turns up in a report in month, say, August, and she turns up in the next month in 2 different locations. So they are not credible. The SOHR is not credible. Unnamed activists are not credible. Once or twice, maybe, but every time, not credible. So your sources on the ground, you don't have them. As for your agenda, not your, but the agenda of some corporate media, it is the agenda of regime change. How can the New York Times, I was reading it this morning, or how can Democracy Now!, which I was reading the other day, maintain until this day that this is a civil war in Syria? How can they maintain until this day that that the protests were unarmed and nonviolent until, say, 2012? That is absolutely not true. How can they maintain that the Syrian government is attacking civilians in Aleppo when every person that's coming out of these areas occupied by terrorists is saying the opposite? There are people that want change in the government. We're not pretending they don't want change. Everybody wants change. But in terms of support of the government, the point is they don't see President Assad as the problem. They see the problem as terrorism. They see elements of problems in the system that they have there. But President Assad, they don't see as the problem. They actually overwhelmingly support him. So I'm basing it on their choice in their leader, and I'm basing it on my interactions with people in Syria and Lebanon.
Just to say, on my own previous trips to Syria, the most difficult thing is to come back to the United States with a message on the role of the U.S. war and the way in which the United States has instigated through many criminal alliances this war on Syria, this effort to completely destroy Syria. So whether it's in Syria or Iraq or Afghanistan or Libya, and we can see the horror of U.S. orchestrated bombing and destruction, what's called regime change. That's far too polite a word. It's really creating total chaos and pulling down a government and leaving behind a divided ruin. And then taking no credit for it, just leaving it to the blame of contending factions that today are controlling Libya. So this is a future that they want for Syria, and this is what the people of Syria are resisting, and resisting with enormous determination to hold together as a secular, united, giving space to every religion, culture, and grouping within Syria. That's quite an accomplishment, and calling on and gaining assistance from other countries, which Syria, as a sovereign nation, has every right to do. On the other hand, the U.S. and the bombing through the United States and NATO and Saudi Arabia and Israel, who was bombing just yesterday in Syria and has continued to, and Jordan and Turkey and so on, none of this is invited. It is all done in the name of attacking ISIS, and yet there's barely a scratch on ISIS. So there's a complete bias, and it is reflected, of course, in the media, a vilification of Syria, of Syria's very right to exist, and a continuing demand for regime change, which really means tearing apart the existing government.
Went through Iraq, went through Libya, went through Syria, going through Syria. Probably the next target is going to be Iran and Hezbollah, right? All of them are mentioned in that document. And although Obama presidency apparently did not include all those neocons, it is following the same policy, of course with a more internationalist view. Bush was very unilateralist in terms of implementation, so it was United States alone doing this and carrying the lead. Probably Obama wants to do it in a more collective way with NATO. But the objective is still the same, and they're pursuing it. And let us not forget that the precondition for making such a thing happen and implementing this general policy requires total support of the media for demonization of the leaders that they want to bring down. And the media has played that role consistently from the beginning. And that's what they're doing. And what Eva was describing and Donna was describing and others is testimony to this integral role of the media in this imperialistic project that is going on. And there must be an end put to it. And this is what we are trying to do.